Did you know that there is a secret two-step calculation method in chess which will help you find the best moves in almost any position? In this video, we'll be learning that method. And by the end of this video, you'll be a much better calculator. Let's begin. Look at this position. It may look like the position is equal because both sides have an equal amount of material. But guess what? White here played knight to d5. This was a game played between two very, very strong grandmasters, yeah? And knight d5 intends to trade off one of the minor pieces. After knight takes, obviously white took the pawn, the bishop took, and we had a normal game, right? No. Bang! This is the winning move, which looks utterly ridiculous. Why is white giving away a pawn? A rook. That's not a pawn. Well, this brings us to the first step of our two-step method, which is CCA, which stands for checks, captures, and attacks. We look for checks first, then captures, then attacks. What checks do we have here? Well, queen h8 is the only check I see here, but then the king takes, and we are losing. Now, let's move on to captures. What captures do we have? We have this capture, but I want to show you something special. Well, queen takes doesn't work because the queen takes back, but the winning move is rook takes. Many players will think that, okay, this, I'll calculate this, and I'll not calculate anything else because nothing else makes sense. But rook takes makes perfect sense once you understand the idea. Now, since there's a checkmate threat on the h7 square, black has to take. This happened in the game. Now, let's look at checks, captures, and attacks once again. Queen h7. If the king goes back here, bishop here is checkmate. So the king had to move forward. Now it's up to you to find the best move for white here using the CCA method. Checks, captures, attacks. Checks come first. The move is pawn takes knight. If the bishop takes, not only do we have this weird configuration of pieces, bishop takes g6 also wins the game due to multiple threats on the black king. Therefore, the black king had to take. Let's look at checks, captures, and attacks once again. Bishop e4, what does that do? How can I find such a move in my game? Here's the thing. We want to bring the black king forward into our side of the board because it's already very exposed. How can we do that? Checks, captures, attacks is the way. Bishop e4, checks are the most important. So we won't consider moves like h3 or queen captures because those are second in priority. First is checks. Checks. So the black king took. Now we have this line here. But again, let's look at checks first. We won't worry about anything else. If white plays a check, the black king runs away. And white realized this, so they played queen to f7. How did they find that move, which is also the best move here? See, there are no sensible checks because any check with the bishop and the king runs away. There are no sensible captures also. If the queen takes on g6, the king runs away yet again. However, we must look at attacks. This king is really exposed. How can we attack it? This is what the grandmaster playing white, Wei Yi, asked himself. Queen here, threatening queen f3 checkmate. After bishop f6 blocking the queen, now bishop d2. There was a repeating of moves. Here, white played queen to b3. Again, excuse me. No sensible checks here as the king will run away. No sensible captures also. Let's look at attacks. The king is exposed. Queen b3 threatens checkmate. Now the black king moved back. Again, checks, captures, attacks. Bang. Rook f1. The black king now cannot move back into his own castle at all. The black king had to step forward, and from here on, the game is over. But wait a minute. Let's look at checks, captures, attacks. Oh, yeah, white is winning. Because after this, the black king is cut off from retreating due to this bishop, and there will be a checkmate soon, right? Wrong. We didn't ask ourselves, how will black respond to our threat? Even black can use the CCA method, right? Black will play pawn here, and now it's much harder to attack the king. The best move is queen to d3, threatening this weak pawn, which delivers checkmate if we are allowed to capture. Now black wanted to prevent any h3 check, so they sacrificed and gave the white king a few checks, but by now the game is over because in a few moves, white keeps using the CCA method. Check, check. Now the game-ending move, bishop to e1, threatening rook f3 followed by checkmate, and queen d3 followed by checkmate. Black decided to resign. GG. Let's move on to the next example where we'll learn what exactly to do if you don't have any checks, captures, or attacks. If you have used the first step, which is the CCA method, but you couldn't find any good moves, then you will use the second step, which is the ASP method. You might be thinking, there are so many steps here. I mean, there are so many elements to this calculation method. How do I actually play this in a game? Will I have the time for it? Here's the thing, once you practice tactics and use this method in your games and tactical puzzles, you'll be able to play it almost automatically. In this game, I was playing with the black pieces and I played a 95% accuracy game by using the ASP method because I wasn't attacking my opponent's king, right? There are no checks, captures, or attacks here. It's still the opening. A stands for activate your pieces. S stands for stop opponent threats. And P stands for pawn breaks. Here I played h6, trying to kick away the opponent bishop. After bishop takes, what would you play? I use the ASP method to decide that, wait, pawn takes is bad because if I take with the bishop, my bishop is more active, right? After knight bd2, rook e8. After white played rook e1, the plan of rook e8 was perhaps to push the pawn in the future. Bishop to f5. I'm not interested in random moves like a6 or b5 because they don't help me activate my pieces. Bishop f5, knight b3. Again, I'm activating my pieces. Now, I have managed to develop all of my pieces, most of my pieces, using the ASP method. Now let us skip a few moves forward to see how the game went on and how I continued to use the ASP method. A few moves later, we got to this position where I played rook to c7, placing my rook on the open c5. But I felt like there was no real plan that I was following. So I decided to make a plan by seeing white's next few moves. I played king g7, king f8, king e7. But why did I bring my king from this part of the board back to the center? Well, I had a plan. I wanted to develop my pieces. This rook isn't doing anything, this rook isn't doing anything. So I wanted to do something, right? How I asked myself, how can I activate my rooks? Well, where do I have pawn breaks, which brings us to the third part of ASP. Activate your pieces, uh, stop opponent threats, and pawn breaks. If I manage to land a pawn break, I'll be able to activate my pieces as files will open. After rook e3, I played bishop to d1. What was my plan? It was to guard this pawn on the g6 square and to stop the advancement of this pawn. Now, look at this. In the next few moves, I doubled my rooks on this g file, and that's what my opponent did too. What was my plan? Let's see. In this position, are there any ways to activate my pieces? Well, if I push here, I'm just losing a pawn. Can't do that, right? What about stopping opponent threats? Does my opponent really have a threat? No, I don't think so, as it's a closed position. That brings us to pawn breaks. Pawn to f6, trying to break apart the white center and to support this push for the movement of this pawn to the g5 square. The king here moved back, and I used ASP again. I asked myself, how can I activate? And I saw this move g5, but I felt like that was too rushed. So I decided to stop opponent threats. For example, maybe this pawn is vulnerable due to this pressure. I decided to defend my pawn. After the king moved there, then I pushed. In a few moves, I got this passed pawn. Even though this position is equal, my opponent made a mistake and I ended up winning the game in this rook endgame. That was the CCA ASP method for you guys, which was two steps. Now, what I want you to do is you have to use this in a game and let me know how it goes. I have several other videos on the CCA method and the ASP method, so make sure you check them out on my channel. Thanks for watching Train to Win. Bye bye.